My mom died of a brain aneurysm December 8th, 1985, when I was just 5 years old. I guess most everyone is afraid of death if they allow themselves to think about it. But my mom's sudden and unexpected passing instilled in me an irrational fear that most boys my age don't have. Because of this irrational fear of everything, I earned the nickname Big Baby, or BB for short. Soon after my mom died, my dad moved us into a crummy apartment right next to the elementary school that I went to. The only good thing about this apartment was that a lot of the kids from school lived there, including my best friend Josh, who lived in the apartment below us with his mom and older sister. My dad was a fireman, and Josh's mom was a nurse, so whenever one of them had to work a late shift, we would spend the night at the other's house. We spent most of our free time together playing football or baseball in the back lot with all the apartment kids. One Saturday just before winter break, we were tossing around a football in the lot when a group of middle school kids came over. This one kid named Scott had been at our school the year prior. He hated me for some reason and was always giving Josh a hard time because of a little stutter he had. As soon as he saw Josh and I, he said, "Oh, look, it's Spaz and his big baby." He got right up in Josh's face and pretended to stutter and then punched me in the stomach so hard that I doubled over and dropped to the ground. He then grabbed the football from one of the younger kids and declared haughtily, "Big kids versus little kids." That made it the 3 of them versus the 6 of us. The big kids took the ball first, of course, and I was happy to see the biggest kid, Winslow, at quarterback, so we didn't have to worry about him flattening us. Winslow was supposedly the toughest kid in the apartments, but I never saw or heard him be mean to anyone. Josh and I lined up on the opposite side of Scott, but then he walked over and made the kid we were lined up in front of switch sides with him so that he could burn us, as he said. Winslow dropped back to pass, and Scott ran right through Josh and I. I fell to the ground, but Josh caught back up with Scott just as Winslow launched a pass. Scott jumped to catch the pass, and it looked like the ball was going to drop right into his outstretched hands, until Josh launched himself into Scott's ribcage head first, like the juggernaut. Scott yelped in pain as he crumpled to the ground. The ball sailed over both their heads and skittered across the ground. Scott jumped up and started pushing Josh, but Josh wasn't backing down. The ball had rolled across the lot to the edge of the woods, and Scott was ordering Josh to get the ball, but Josh shouted, "Make me! Go ahead and make me!" I wanted to defuse the situation, so I walked between them and said, "I'll get the ball, okay? Everybody chill." As I made my way towards the ball, I noticed in the woods a faint path I had never seen before. The apartments backed up to a woody ridge, and the path went all the way to the top of the ridge. And at the top sat a little cabin with a chimney on the far left side. I hollered back to the group, "Hey, look, there's an old cabin up there." Josh ran over to where I was standing, and I pointed out where the cabin was, and we both stood there and stared up at it. Scott yelled at us to stop screwing around and to hurry up and bring back the ball so we could finish the game. This kid named Robbie shouted to us to come back, that his brother had told him a witch lived up there in that cabin. That made my eyes widen, and I scanned the front of the cabin for any signs of a witch. Scott came over and snatched the ball from me and said that we were all a bunch of dorks and Robbie was lying about the witch, just to try and scare us. Robbie's face turned red and he pleaded with us that he wasn't lying, that he had heard whenever kids in town went missing. It was because the witch of the hill had got them. Winslow said that he heard from his uncle that a few years ago some men had robbed a bank and stashed the cash up there. The police got the men, but they never could find the cash because there was a secret hiding spot in the cabin. Josh started to walk towards the path. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm going to find that money," he said. All the other boys ran over and fell in line behind Josh as he started walking up the ridge. I started to protest, "What about the witch?" but caught myself, realizing the mockery that would surely bring. So I mustered up my courage and followed behind everyone else. Winslow got to the cabin first and started looking in the windows, but said they were locked and papered over from the inside. Someone tried the front door, but it was nailed shut. The back door was boarded shut too, but Josh noticed that paper was peeling back on one of the back windows. The visible portion of the window was about 8 feet above the ground. Scott said, "Hey, let's lift one of the little kids up. Where's BB?" The older boys started coming towards me, and I knew there was no use in trying to argue. Winslow squatted down towards the house and the window, and then the other boys lifted me to stand on his shoulders. They held my legs steady as Winslow stood up. As I got up to the window and looked through, I could barely see anything. The room I was looking into was all dark wood. The floors were so dark they looked like they had been burned. I was looking at the west wall of the cabin, and there was a stone fireplace that took up most of that wall. And inside the fireplace hung a large cast iron kettle. Josh appealed eagerly, "What do you see? What do you see?" And Scott said, "Yeah, are there any witches in there?" I started describing everything as my eyes traveled around the room, but gasped when I noticed a small door just to the right of the fireplace. "Hey, there's a creepy little hobbit door next to the fireplace," I said. Josh shouted gleefully, "That's gotta be where the money's stashed. We gotta find a way in." Winslow let me down, and we all looked around the cabin for other entrances until someone noticed some steps that seemed to go down underneath the house. Josh, I guess wanting to prove himself to the other boys, had gotten bold and was the first one to go down the steps. He yelled back from somewhere under the house that the steps went down into a cellar. We all made our way over to the steps, and as I made my way down, I noticed that it got colder and of course darker. There were little openings at the top of the cellar walls that let the tiniest slivers of light in. I noticed that the cellar was lined with shelves that were full of glass jars with brown liquids in them. Everything was covered in cobwebs and the air smelled sickly sweet. At the end of the cellar there was an old wooden ladder that went up to a trapdoor that must have been right in the middle of the cabin. The trapdoor appeared to be propped open just enough for a little kid to be able to fit through. My heart dropped. There was no way I was going up that ladder. To my surprise, nobody else was very keen to climb the ladder either. Suddenly, Josh blurted out that he wasn't afraid to go up and check it out. I tried to talk him out of it, but he seemed to want to prove something. We all stood in the cellar at the bottom of the ladder as Josh climbed up and through the wooden hatch at the top. Once inside, he relayed to us that it was really dark except for the little bit of light coming through the window I had looked through. Scott yelled for him to open the hatch all the way so that everyone could come up. Josh pulled up on the hatch from the inside, but it wouldn't budge. "Come help me, BB," he said. I shivered. I did not want to go up there, but I knew I would never hear the end of it if I didn't. "Yeah, BB, get up there and help your spazzy girlfriend," Scott taunted. I sighed heavily and started climbing the ladder. I grasped the handle of the trapdoor and stuck my head through the opening. I scanned the room the best I could, but I didn't see Josh anywhere. From the right side of the room, I heard a thump and then a scurrying noise, like someone crawling on their hands and knees real fast across the floor. Just then, I was sure I saw what looked like a skinny old man or woman dressed only in dark brown loincloth crawling through the tiny door I had seen from the window. I was so startled that I lost my footing on the ladder and started to fall. I tried to steady myself by holding onto the trapdoor, but whatever was holding it open gave way and the door pulled closed. Then the door itself gave way, and I fell a few feet down onto the center of the ladder, which broke the ladder in half, sending myself and the two halves of the ladder crashing to the ground. Scott laughed, but everyone else came to check if I was all right. I shooed everyone away and stood and brushed myself off. "Don't worry about BB," Scott said. "How is Spaz getting down?" We all looked up at the hole in the cabin floor where the trap door had been. I called out, "Josh!" but there was no answer. "Josh!" Everyone called out in unison. Josh's head appeared above the hole in the floor. "Oh my gosh, what the heck happened?" he asked. Scott teased in a baby voice, "The big baby got scared and broke the ladder." "Can you hang down and I'll grab your legs?" Winslow asked. Josh nodded his head yes and then popped his knuckles. He sat down and swung his legs over and into the opening and then gripped the right edge. He said, "Ready or not, here I come." and then slid off the edge and almost fell, but was able to hang there with one hand until Winslow was able to grab him around the calves and let him down easy. "Did you open the little door?" Winslow asked. Josh shook his head no. He said he had tried, but it was locked tight and he couldn't find a key. He attempted to pry it open with a poker that was next to the fireplace, but the gap was too small and we would need a crowbar or a screwdriver to take the hinges off. One of the kids said his dad had a whole closet full of tools, so everyone agreed we'd come back Monday as soon as we got off the bus. We all started walking back down the ridge to the apartments. Josh grabbed my arm and mouthed the words, "Hang back," to me. Once there was some distance between us and the other boys, it came back to me with a jolt what I thought I had seen crawling across the floor of the cabin. Before Josh could speak, I asked him what had happened in there. That I thought I had seen a little old man or something crawling through that little door. Josh laughed. "You need to get your eyes checked, man. That was me you saw crawling through the door. I had just found the key to the door hanging right there by the fireplace." "Well, why did you say you couldn't get in?" I asked. "Because I didn't want everyone else to know what I saw in there," he replied. Josh told me that he had opened the door, and there was about a 5-foot-long shaft that led to another room. He said he just peeked his head into the other room, but that he saw a duffel bag laying in one of the corners, and there were 4 or 5 bundles of cash spilling out of it onto the floor. "We're rich," he whispered. Josh then started to lay out his plan. He said we had to enact the plan before Monday. He would be at his grandparents' house most of the day Sunday, but return around 5 p.m., at which point his mom would head to work. My dad also had to work Sunday night, so it was already in the plans that I was spending the night at his house, where his sister would be in charge of watching us. We knew that Josh's mom would order us a pizza, like usual, for dinner. And after eating, we knew his sister would stay locked in her room all night, talking to her friends on the phone. The plan was to wait until we heard her on the phone, and then we would sneak out of Josh's window and make our way up to the cabin. My hope was that we would eat pizza and start playing Nintendo, and Josh would forget all about sneaking out. I was wrong. That Sunday, my dad left for work around 7 p.m., and I walked down the steps to Josh's apartment. He met me at the door and rushed me to his room, where he proudly displayed 2 large Maglite flashlights he said he had stolen from the apartment front office. I sighed. "Oh my gosh, man, I didn't think you were really serious about doing this. How are we going to even get inside the cabin? The ladder is broken." Josh smiled and opened up the large duffel bag that was lying on the bed. Inside the bag was a knotted climbing rope that he had clearly stolen from the playground, and shoved through the loop at the end of the rope was a round metal fence post. "What the heck are we going to do with that?" I asked, puzzled. Josh said that we would underhand toss the post up through the opening where the trap door had been, and the post would hang over the opening on either side, allowing us to climb up the rope. I rolled my eyes as Josh put the flashlights in the bag. We ate pizza and played Nintendo until we heard Josh's sister lock her bedroom door and start talking on the phone. It was about 9 p.m. now, and I really didn't want to do this, but Josh said he would go without me if he had to. I relented, and we made his bed to look like we were asleep and quietly crawled out of his bedroom window. We walked quietly in the dark as we crossed the back lot and stopped just at the edge of the woods where the path began. Josh opened the duffel bag and handed me one of the flashlights. It was a windy night, which made the woods all the more eerie as we walked up the ridge to the cabin. Our lights illuminated the cabin, which already seemed to have a strange glow from the moonlight. We weren't talking at all, and Josh was moving so fast that I could barely keep up. By the time I made it down the stairs to the cellar, he was already making an attempt to throw the fence post through the hole in the floor. The post didn't land right the first 2 times and came crashing back down into the cellar with a high metallic bong sound as it hit the ground. I helped Josh on the 3rd toss, and the post stayed inside the cabin. Josh pulled the rope tight and the post held, so he put his flashlight in the duffel bag and put his arms through the handles so that he was wearing it like a backpack. He told me to shine my light through the opening as he climbed up. Josh climbed up the rope to the post and then used that to pull himself up to where he could then get his legs inside and then sort of rolled over onto the cabin floor. Josh was a pretty strong kid, always doing the most push-ups and sit-ups in gym class. I was a little worried I wouldn't be able to duplicate his feat of getting into the cabin. I couldn't find a place to put my flashlight. It was too big to fit in my waistband and too long to fit in my back pocket. Josh told me to throw it up to him, which I did, and then I started to climb the rope, which was way easier than I expected. At the top, I gripped the post like Josh and tried to pull my legs up. My arms were shaking, but Josh was able to grab my legs and help me up. As I rolled over onto the cabin floor, I lay on my back and looked up at the ceiling. It was a vaulted ceiling, and from the rafters hung cobwebs and dusty bundles of sage that had been hung to dry there. God only knows how long ago. Josh handed me my flashlight, and I stood up and shined it around the room. The floors and all along the bottoms of the walls were coal black as if they had been burned. The room was almost completely empty except for a single wooden chair next to the fireplace and what looked like a straw bed up against the other wall. Particles of dust glistened in the flashlight beam, and I shuddered as I wondered how I let Josh talk me into this. Josh was fumbling with the key to open the tiny door. I told him I had a bad feeling about this, and he stopped what he was doing, put his flashlight to his chin, and stared at me with a disdain I had never seen from him before. I started to speak, but he cut me off and said, "Aren't you tired of everyone calling you a big baby all the time?" I started to speak again, but he cut me off again. I even heard Winslow say that you were an annoying little brat, always whining all the time. I felt my face turn red. Josh went back to trying the lock, and I heard it click open. Josh glared up at me. "I'm going in. You find something to prop this door open so it doesn't shut on us. Once I'm through, you better be right behind me, or I swear I'll kick your ass." I stood there in stunned silence as Josh began to crawl on his hands and knees through the little door and down the 5-foot shaft. I grabbed the chair from beside the fireplace, but just as I was about to prop the door open, a draft pulled it shut with a hard slam. I heard Josh scream from somewhere inside, "BB, help, help!" But it sounded like he was a mile away. I tried to open the little door, but the suction was strong, and there was nothing on the door to grab hold of. I pressed my fingers under the door and dug my fingernails into the old wood and pulled with as much force as I could. 2 of my fingernails peeled back, but I gritted my teeth and kept pulling as Josh continued screaming. I managed to pry the door open enough to get my fingers all the way underneath the bottom, and then I pulled it all the way open and shoved the chair in front of it to hold it open. Josh had stopped screaming as I grabbed my flashlight and began to crawl through the shaft. "Josh!" I called meekly, my ears pounding with fear. "Josh!" I called a little louder as my head poked through the shaft and into the hidden room. There were no windows, so the room was almost pitch black. I shined my flashlight in one corner, and I saw the duffel bag Josh had mentioned, but I didn't see any bundles of cash spilling out. I moved my flashlight across the back wall to the other corner, but still no Josh. Just then, I heard a creaking sound above me, so I instinctually shined my light up into the rafters. To my horror, I saw Josh hanging upside down, his feet tied to the rafters, his hair as white as snow. I cried out in terror, "Josh?" as I started to stand up. His eyes were wide open with shock, fixed on the corner of the room directly to the right of me. His mouth was moving, but no sound was coming out. He looked directly in my eyes and whimpered shakily, "Witch?" I swung my light over to the corner and saw the old woman I had seen the day before. She was crouched down, gripping the end of the rope that Josh was tied to. She was glaring at me like a wolf waiting to attack. Her eyes were small and beady, sunk deep in her face like 2 lumps of coal. There was nothing human in those eyes. They were cold and feral like a wild animal. She bared her rotten brown teeth, and dark drool spilled from the corners of her gaping mouth. Her coarse gray hair hung down over her chest to wide, jutting hip bones protruding above the dirt-brown loincloth. The witch stood, and I noticed her arms and legs were unnaturally long and spindly. and her sallow, pale skin hung from her bones like draped fabric. As she slowly moved towards me, I heard a familiar voice far away like a dream, but I couldn't make out what it was saying. Looking back, I remember a feeling almost like waking up from anesthesia, and then I realized the familiar voice I heard was my own telling myself to move, move! The witch dropped the rope and lunged at me just as I pulled back into the shaft and started to back my way out. I heard Josh crumple to the floor with a thud, and then moan softly. I lost my flashlight in the shaft as I backed through the small door. Then the witch's face appeared in the light just as I slammed the door shut. I pressed against the door with all the weight of my body, expecting some resistance from the other side, but there was none. And the cabin was deathly silent except for the heavy beating of my heart. I strained my ears to see if I could hear anything as I fumbled with the key to lock the door. "Open the door," a voice whispered. "Josh, is that you?" I asked shakily. The voice replied, "Of course it's me. What's going on out there? I heard the wind blow the door shut, and then you started screaming and freaking out. Please, just let me out of here." "Josh, I know that's not you," I whimpered. "Let me out right now, you big baby," Josh yelled. I started to ease my weight off the door. Then I heard a terrifying voice that haunts me to this day.
"Let me out, you stupid boy."
The little door blasted open with such force that I was flung across the room and over the hole in the floor, where the trapdoor once was. I reached out desperately for anything to grab onto as I fell backwards through the hole. I managed to grasp the metal post that was over the hole, but my fingers slipped, and I ended up dragging the pole and the rope down into the cellar with me as I landed on my back with a thud. It took me a few moments for my head to stop spinning. Everything was really bright, and as I looked up, I realized the blinding light was shining through the hole in the cabin floor. It was brighter than a flashlight, and I couldn't tell what the source of the light was. "You big baby," I heard a quavering voice say. I squinted my eyes and could see Josh's face in the space where the trapdoor used to be. Trembling, he cried over and over, "You big baby." A hand with long, gnarly fingers gripped the top of his skull and moved his head around like a puppet as he spoke the words. Then the fingers dug in deep and Josh was pulled by his head away from the hole and out of view. I heard him kicking and screaming as he was drugged somewhere deep in the cabin. I rolled over and got to my feet and started hobbling out of the cellar. I pressed myself to the wall for balance as I climbed the cellar stairs. As I stumbled over the top step and into the dark night, I perceived the bright light from the cabin coming up the stairs behind me. I lumbered across the dirt yard in the direction of that path down the ridge, and the bright light followed me like a prison spotlight. I tried to run, but my legs weren't cooperating, and I started to stumble down the steep ridge path. I pitched forward and tumbled over down the path 3 or 4 times. The light was right behind me, so I just let my body go where it wanted to go as I tripped and rolled down the path. I was moving faster than any walking human was capable, but I couldn't seem to put any distance between myself and the light. I slid the final 30 feet down the path to where it flattened and merged with the back lot of the apartments. As I stood, I felt the strength return to my legs, and I ran as fast as I could across the lot into the apartments. I climbed the stairs to my own apartment, unlocked the door, jumped inside, and then shut and locked it behind me. My heart was racing, but I thought I was safe now. I picked up the phone and called my dad at the firehouse. When he answered the phone, I just yelled, "Come quick, it's Josh, it's Josh!" I hung up the phone and waited in the pitch-dark apartment until I heard the fire truck pull up. I slowly opened the door and peeked out. My dad and some of the other firemen jumped out of the truck and ran up to the apartment to get me. I tried to explain what happened, but I was hyperventilating and crying at the same time. I managed to relay that Josh was stuck in the cabin on the ridge. My dad stayed behind as the other men grabbed an axe and made their way up to the cabin. I tried to explain to my dad what had happened, but he kept saying I wasn't making any sense. My dad called the paramedics, then Josh's mom at the hospital, and they both arrived just as the firemen were bringing Josh down the ridge. The paramedics met the firemen at the bottom of the ridge with a stretcher so they could roll Josh to the ambulance. I wanted to see him, but my dad told me that it was best for Josh if we stayed out of the way. I saw his bright white hair as he was lifted into the ambulance, and as the stretcher tilted forward, he made eye contact with me, and for some reason he started laughing uncontrollably. He was still laughing as the ambulance doors were shut, and then the paramedics drove him to the hospital. Later, as I was lying in bed, with no chance of ever falling asleep, I overheard my dad in the living room talking with one of the firemen that had gone up to the cabin. He said they had to bust down the front door of the cabin and were looking all around for Josh, but couldn't find him anywhere. He was the first to notice the tiny door near the fireplace because he heard the drafty air whistling behind it. He got the door open and started to crawl through the shaft. With his flashlight, he could see the end of the shaft was blocked by a body. He was clearly looking at a bare back that was covered in bruises and scratch marks. It looked like a young boy, so he called out, "Josh, is that you?" But there was no response. He crawled to the end of the shaft and gently touched the only spot he could find on the back that wasn't damaged and repeated, "Josh, is that you?" The body shivered and he heard a boy's voice say with a laugh, "He left me, he left me." He tried to gently nudge Josh's body forward so that he could get into the room to get him out, but he couldn't budge him. He pushed a little harder, but he couldn't move Josh at all. He had to finally lay sideways and push with his feet against the side of the shaft to force Josh out of the way. Once he got inside, he looked around, but there was no one in the room, but he and Josh. He tried to get Josh to crawl back through the shaft, but he said he just sat there rigid as stone staring at the wall, repeating, "He left me, and laughing to himself over and over. He finally had to just drag Josh through the shaft to get him out of that cabin. I vaguely remember 2 detectives coming by the apartment the next day to ask questions. They spoke to my dad first. I had told him my story a few times now, and he relayed the facts, as he saw them, to the detectives. It seems odd now, but the detectives didn't ask me any questions. They basically just had me nod and confirm what my dad had said. They told us they recovered the duffel bag that we had thought was loaded with cash, and though they didn't find any cash, they did find an ID and some personal items. It was determined these items belonged to a homeless woman who had been found under a bridge that very morning, dead of an apparent overdose. The story that wound up in the newspaper was, "Homeless woman in drug-induced frenzy terrorizes 2 young boys in an abandoned cabin in the woods." A week or so later, Josh's mom came by to talk to my dad, and I was told to stay in my room until they were done talking. I pressed my ear to my bedroom door and heard his mom explain that Josh wouldn't talk to anyone, and all day long he would just stare at the ceiling light. She worried he would damage his eyes, so she would turn out the light, but he would continue to stare where the light had been. She said she was moving the family in with her parents so they could watch Josh while she was at work. She said that the doctors could only tell her that they suspected Josh had severe PTSD, but they had no idea if he'd ever fully recover. I didn't know it then, but that night would be the last time I would see Josh again for a very long time. Over the years, rumors would circulate that Josh was rotting away in a mental institution, or that he never spoke again and just sits in his family's home staring at the walls all day. After I graduated high school, I went to the local college, and a girl I dated, whom Josh and I had both known from elementary school, said she was pretty sure Josh was in one of her classes and that he seemed pretty normal and well-adjusted. She said that his hair was no longer white but brown, like when we were kids. A few years after that, I saw a man in a big box retail store that looked just like Josh, and so I started walking towards him to get a better look. As I got about 50 feet away, the man noticed me, and it looked like he recognized me too. I smiled a little, certain now it was Josh, and continued walking towards him, until I noticed he was looking through me and there was a soullessness in his eyes like a wild animal. The corners of his mouth curled up in a wide, unsettling grin, Then he puffed out his chest a bit as if he was challenging me and mouthed what looked like, "Big baby." I froze for a moment and had that feeling like the floor had dropped out. I quickly turned down another aisle and walked right out of the store.